And we continue at 2:05 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang has the day off. He'll be back with us next week. 800-222-5222 is telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. If you're on hold, stay there. We're going to go right back to the phones. Later on in the hour, we'll take as many calls as we can. I know many of you want to weigh in on the topic of a transgendered woman in the women's restroom at the Gold's Gym in Los Angeles. The woman complained about it, and her membership was revoked, and now she is not happy about it. So we'll get back to the calls and take more of your takes on that coming up later on in the program. Right now, it is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is a former member of Congress representing the great state of Florida, Congressman Mark Foley. Welcome.
Thanks, John. Good to be with you.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by, and happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be a great one. Here in Palm Beach County, President Trump will be arriving shortly to spend his Thanksgiving at Mar-a-Lago. So this town is going to be gangbusters with unbelievable traffic from his motorcade to his arrival to just Northeasterners coming down to spend Thanksgiving here.
Well, and he already parted the turkey, so he got all of his business in Washington done before he took off to celebrate the holiday.
He and George Santos, another turkey. but I digress.
All right. Now, you were in Congress back when Republicans did well in congressional elections, and you've been there a couple of times when they've taken it in the teeth. Typically, the party that is currently in power, when you get to the midterms, has a tough time hanging on to the seats that they have in their possession. This cycle looks like it's not going to break precedent. And particularly, I think the issue that right now is the biggest thorn in Donald Trump's side is the issue of the cost of living. That was one of the subjects that he ran on in the last presidential election. The cost of eggs in particular were a sore spot for Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, and they clearly had no plan on what to do to bring down the cost of living. And right now, I guess the increase in inflation is not where it was, but that doesn't look like it's going to be good enough for a lot of voters. A lot of voters, when they go to buy a new car, when they go to the grocery store, when they're looking to rent a hotel room, buy an airplane ticket, whatever the case may be, they're getting sticker shock still when they look at just how much it costs to purchase everyday items, the cost of living. How important is it for Donald Trump and the Republicans to bring down the cost of living if they're going to do okay in the midterms?
There's no question, no matter how much money you have, when you go to a grocery store and you see a New York strip steak, two of them in a package that's $49, you decide you're going vegan. We are having a crisis of confidence in the economic system currently. Now, Donald Trump put in place some things that should improve the economy. Unfortunately, he's now dealing with the Instagram generation, meaning they want an instant hit, an instant reduction, an instant bit of joy, and they wanted the prices to almost magically drop. Well, I believe he has put in place for things to improve next year, but the patience of the American voter is very thin. John, you can watch polls change week by week on any topic we choose to discuss today. But the one thing I always said that makes people angry, especially in California, is when you pull up to the gas station and you put your hand on that pump and you insert it in your tank and you're seeing those digits roll around. It's an instant anger that frustrates people because they say, why is gas $7, $6, $5, whatever it is in Los Angeles these days? And so every week, sometimes twice a week, people are reminded of how politics influences their lives. You know, Walmart did come out the other day and said turkeys and the Thanksgiving dinner for a group of 8 would be less than it was last year by 5 or 10%. Well, that's not enough because the people realize too that they deducted some items from the gift basket that would be normally included in a Thanksgiving meal preparation. So everyone has this bit of the Jimmy Carter word, malaise. They worked hard, they play by the rules, They go to the grocery store, and a simple stop by Ralph's could, cost you $200 to get some basic items for the family. So those are the constant barometers of America's political thermometer. They see immediately what life is like for them when they have to charge up groceries, fill the car, get drugs at a Rite Aid or another pharmacy. So I believe the Republicans better get very busy because people don't get all of this tax relief because they don't really see it. You get a net paycheck and they say, well, that's what I got last year. So they don't see this evolution of economic prosperity that's been discussed by the Republicans. So I would suggest that the Republicans better figure out ways, and I wouldn't support the $2,000 giveaway the president suggested. I'd say pay down the debt first. That may help in interest rates, but they better get busy. I think what will be the true barometer of where we are is when we see members' resignations like Marjorie Taylor Greene starting in February, other members besides her that are in safer districts or marginal districts. When we see them bailing, I think that's going to be a tell for whether the Republicans maintain majority. It's tight. It's never going to be easy. We had I think we were at 247. So we had a, 40 plus vote margin on any vote we cast on the House floor. But that dwindled year after year until the Democrats took control in 2006. So it was a slow drip, if you will, of support, because they have to blame somebody, and it's always going to be the majority party, and that includes the president, the Senate, and the House, right now configured as Republican-led. So I think there's a lot of work ahead of them, and they better get it right and get started on it instead of having the government shut down for 42 damn days.
You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, the firebrand congresswoman from Georgia, who just announced that she'll be resigning from Congress in the upcoming year, will not be finishing her term. So I guess there'll be a special election down in her district in Georgia. She was someone that, while would throw bombs on social media and on cable news and various forums, was someone who was very close not only to President Trump, but to the leadership in the House. She was one of the ones that wanted to keep Kevin McCarthy in as Speaker, and she wasn't part of the Matt Gaetz crowd that wanted to dump the Speaker and replace him with someone else. Does the fact that she is calling it quits midterm after a squabble with the president and a battle on social media with many of his supporters, does this surprise you?
It really doesn't. I could see the writing on the wall weeks ago when she started picking up fights with him. In fact, I'm involved in a company in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's our district representative. And we had a call amongst our team, and they were talking about having her help us on an issue in Washington. I said, let's not. And they said, oh, why? She's so popular. She's so popular, Mark. Why would you say don't invite her to the office? I said, because number one, she's got the speaker all upset. She's got the president angrier than I've ever seen him on an issue that involves the Epstein tapes, files, what have you. So I knew she was in hot water. You can only think of another name, Adam Kinzinger, who joined the Democrats and some of the antics of the president on, the January 6th committee. And so Adam decided to bail because the president made it his mission to remove a Republican, Adam Kinzinger, from Congress. Marjorie saw the same flashing lights. She knew she could not win. And despite her appearance on The View, that didn't actually help. That actually hurt her with the rock rib conservatives. So I think she may have lost her district without angering the president. And I think many members have to be careful, for that certainty is no longer there that you're an incumbent. They may hate Congress, but they love their congressperson. Well, that's out the window. That ship has sailed. People don't even like congressmen. You hear Rick Scott went into a Starbucks the other day, and a woman was screaming over at her top of her lungs about something he took away, health care. And, in politics, I remember having disagreements with constituents. They'd come up, but they'd always be polite. They never yelled. They said, oh, I saw you voted for this, and I want to explain to you my position, and maybe it will help influence you in the future. It was always polite and cordial. You were respected. They saw you as a leader. Now, when they're yelling at Rick Scott in a Starbucks at a volume that was unprecedented, it makes you wonder why anybody even wants to be in office. But that's the raw nerve we're in today. There's no longer this speech and debate. Have a nice conversation, talk about how you can make legislation better, and pass it. No, now it's attack the other side. Don't be seen with them. Don't talk to them. Don't strategize with them. And Thomas Massey in Kentucky is probably going to see a similar fate. Rand Paul, who I do like because he's a maverick, he speaks his mind, and I do like people that speak outside of the bubble. But they're all on the edge because they've taken on a popular president. That being said, John, you and I both know how quickly popularity sinks. And what I've been watching the last couple of weeks, he can't seem to make it work like he did when he first started for the first 12 months. Since the election of Mandami, the political winds have shifted, not in the direction of Mandami, but it's caused people to say, well, why would they vote for a guy that's anti-Jewish in a state or city that has more Jews than any place else in the world other than Israel? It makes you realize people aren't necessarily seeing him as a solution. They're protesting with their vote against the establishment. So if I were a Republican running today, I'd be seriously considering heading for the exits because I don't think it's fun to be there. I don't think anything's getting done. 42 days of air traffic controllers and others, TSA workers, airport lines, cancellations. That's the kind of thing that affects the voter. They see it. They may not have been personally impacted, but they feel the anger where people feel their government's failing them. And so I wouldn't want to be in a body or running for re-election when people are this angry at the political status quo.
We're speaking with former Florida Congressman Mark Foley. Let's talk about another member of Congress who's calling it quits. The former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, who announced after the vote on Prop 50 here in California that she would not be running for re-election. She will serve out the remaining portion of her term. Did that surprise you?
It didn't surprise me at all, and I hope she'll get the rest of the nursing home colleagues that currently serve in Congress out the door because there are members that are there that don't even know where they are, never mind that they're in Congress. The delegate from Washington, D.C., in their home's Norton, couldn't tell you the time of day, even if it was blaring in front of her with a stopwatch. Nancy didn't surprise me because she's aging. You can see it in the way she moves her mouth. You can see it in the way she conducts herself. She took that fall in Europe. You know, at some age, you start deteriorating, and it's very difficult to keep up with the job. I commend her. She served brilliantly. She was probably one of the best architects of a democratic survival group that were able to stay united and get things done. So she deserves a lot of kudos. But I do think and I do pray that some of the far right and far left decide that it's time to seek another profession. I would like to see younger voices. I don't know if it's going to be another Pelosi in San Francisco, the daughter I'm speaking of, but definitely didn't surprise me because I knew this day would come and it had to come soon before she became embarrassed like some other members. Kay Granger, a member from Texas, John, was living in an Alzheimer unit in Texas for 8 months. Nobody even knows she was missing from House votes. They just said, well, she wasn't feeling well. She was in a dementia ward in Fort Worth, Texas. And she still had her paycheck, her voting privileges, and she hadn't known the time of day in over 8 months. So I think it's a clear warning, and Mandami's election is a sign that they're willing to go to a voter, inexperienced younger person, to represent them and try anything to see if it brings about a better outcome for our world, our cities, and our communities.
What happens? What did you see happening when there was a member who was clearly senile, but they had a name that was well known in their district? They're proven vote getters. No one was ever going to beat them, and they weren't all there mentally. Who became the power player there? Was it the people who worked for them in the office, the chief of staff and others? Was it the leadership of the party where it was just a vote that they controlled lock, stock, and barrel? Who was it that had the control over that office?
You pretty much highlighted all of the reasons why they survived, because the staff, the chief of staff, could give himself a pay raise without the members' knowledge. He could organize staff outings. He could recruit new staff to the team. The member wasn't involved. They weren't interacting with their staff. They had no idea who was being hired, how many people were on the payroll. And the leadership again said, well, somebody will help them push the button. And I've seen it happen on the floor. We have these three buttons. It's yes, no, and present. And they electronically record your vote. You put your card in, your voter card from the member of Congress, and you select three things. And I've watched people help members who I knew were feeble push the right button. So that's formulaic. That's just simply the way the process works. But it bothers me more than anything else that there are people running the office of a member of Congress and the member doesn't even know what's going on. Same can be said, I believe strongly, in the Biden administration. He had an inner circle of old Senate hands that worked for him for 30, 40 years, that were up on Capitol Hill at the White House and between the Capitol buildings, signing, auto-penning things for him, appointing friends to ambassadorships, doing things, covertly, even though the boss had no clue what was going on. Those are the real-time problems that you see up close and personal when nobody has the strength to say to a member, it's time to go. And I think Nancy probably, just the sheer travel between San Francisco and Washington has to be getting tiring, and she's done it so long, she's probably glad to call it quits while she is still feeble. But that is exactly the problem. The staff runs the place, runs the office, makes certain everything's good for them while the member is virtually incapacitated.
We have about 60 seconds left. I don't know if you saw the clip that CNN's Alex Michelson posted. He was doing a postmortem on the 2024 election, and Tom Donilon, who was a top advisor to Joe Biden, maybe even one of the guys you just referenced there in your last answer, was speaking with Alex about the 2024 election, and he said that the big mistake that the Democrats made was pushing Joe Biden out of the race. That if they just kept Joe Biden in the race, that was the ticket to prosperity.
I don't disagree. I mean, everyone knew he was, suffering, but the way they did it to him really was unspeakable. Instead of properly doing it when they should have about a year before the election, saying, you said you were a change agent, you were going to serve one term, you're going to move on. Let's open the primary up and have people who are capable and able to run. But that last minute switcheroo orchestrated by Pelosi and Obama to force him out and put Kamala in the ring certainly showed a lack of understanding of the political temperature in the United States of America. Kamala Harris couldn't win, I don't think, anything in California any longer statewide. So I hear she may run again, but no question, that would have been an easier way for the Democrats to save face than switching horses the way they did in a very embarrassing manner and then putting in somebody so highly unqualified. If they'd have gone to Shapiro in Pennsylvania or any number of people, they may have had a better outcome. But frankly, the way they handled Joe Biden after all of his years of service was a slap in the face to anybody who served in that institution. And they got their comeuppance in a big way with Trump winning 7 swing states, the popular vote, and the Electoral College.
Former Florida Congressman Mark Foley, thank you so much for stopping by today. Have a great Thanksgiving, a great holiday break, and we'll check back again real soon.
Go Angels. See you later.
All right.
John.
I never get tired of hearing that. Thanks so much for stopping by. It's the John Phillips. It's the John Phillips Show. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And with the end of the show quickly approaching, if you missed the first hour, you missed the second hour, and you want to find out what you missed out on, you can go back and listen to the podcast edition of the program and find out everything that you missed out on and enjoy it whenever and wherever you'd like. All right, let's go back to the phones at 800-222-5222 and begin with Chris in Studio City. Chris, hello.
Hi, John. I was at a Ralph's or a FedEx, I can't remember where, and I saw this middle-aged woman wearing a shirt that said feminist on it. So I said, so are you a feminist? I didn't know if it was her daughter's shirt or whatever. And she said, yes, I am. And I said, well, what do you think about these men who say they're transphobic or transgender or whatever, going into women's locker rooms and being naked in front of girls? And first I asked, do you have a daughter? And she said no. And then he said, well, they all have a right to do what they want and be what they want and, and do whatever they want. And I said, so I guess before the 19th Amendment, where women got the right to vote and men were in charge, it's come all the way around and they're in charge again. And I said, think about it. Because I wasn't going to argue with her. She just didn't have a clue,
Well, usually the answer is this is something that is extremely rare. It doesn't happen all of the time. When it does happen, it makes the news, and people think that it's something that's more common than it is. Well, I think that you could have made that argument before the current craze, but now it seems like it's popping up all over the place. And you talk to people in your life, particularly those with children, who deal with this with the sports teams, and they deal with this with the high schools, and they deal with it in any forum or any place where you have single-sex spaces. It's not something that is just happens once in a blue moon anymore. It's something that's going on in all 50 states, and it's on our radar because it is happening.
Yeah, but she had a shirt saying that she was a feminist. A feminist means women's rights. But these are not women's rights. This is, men in charge. What rights do you have? I'm a man, and I'm telling you what I can do. And I hope your daughter looks really good when I see her.
All right. Thanks for the call, sir. Let's go to Ken in Studio City. Ken, hello.
Hi, John. Thank you for taking my call. First of all, let me start by saying I think I remember this news story about this woman who tried to create such a deal. I believe that she was black, and I learned on your show earlier that she's a lesbian. And so I bet you $1 million that she's been voting for politicians and policies which has caused this in the first place. Now to my point. This social, this gender theory, this transgender theory is one of the social contagions that we're dealing with. Social contagions have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It only takes a few years to create a warped idea and instill it in people's minds. A morally bankrupt, warped idea only takes a few years, but it takes generations. If it ever is to be undone, it takes generations. My previous girlfriend, just recently broken up, was from Russia. She spent her childhood under the Soviet Union. And she was telling me how they would install their ideas, their more amoral, bankrupt ideas in children's minds. Yet she could tell me how they did it and what she experienced, yet she could not connect the dots and understand that she still had some of these attitudes. She wasn't communist, but she still had bankrupt, more amoral ideas from the Soviet period in her mind. And she just couldn't connect the dots. When it comes to feminists, I'm going to kind of ride Chris's coattails. Feminists, these women who call themselves feminists, they don't understand that they are actually supporting the very ideas, these horrible, bankrupt ideas that cause them harm. And so...
Well, I can tell you this, and I've experienced this in my own personal life when I talk to people I'm related to or friends, people who are a generation, let's say, or more younger than me. And I'm 45 years old, so I'm not ancient history yet. However, when you talk to them about politics, particularly the ones with common sense, with their heads screwed on straight, and they go to school and the teachers tell them that men can get pregnant, and the teachers tell them that men need feminine hygiene products in their bathrooms, and the taxpayers need to pay for that, and they need to be readily available for all in the men's restroom. What you do is you lose them. You lose your authority to influence their ideas and to influence their opinion on subjects. Because if you're smart, you know that men can't get pregnant. And you're aware of the fact that they're putting political pressure on you, they're putting social pressure on you to publicly state something that you know not to be true. And for whatever reason,
John,
it's really important to them that you give in on this thing. And the pushback and the resentment that creates is off the charts. Because I went to school for political science. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in political science. So I've been a political animal since I was very young. But most people aren't political animals. And when you talk to them about politics and you talk to them specifically about these subjects, they make me look like Tom Hayden. They make me look like a liberal, because they're the overcorrection, the overreaction to the system trying to shove a bunch of ideas down their throat that they know aren't true is causing a reaction of them to just rebel against everything that these people are putting in front of them. And I don't think that they know what they're creating. The next generation of people, I think, particularly young men, are going to be more conservative than the previous generations, maybe even as conservative as the World War II generation, because they're just rejecting all of this nonsense that's being fed to them.
And when you instill these ideas in children, if they're young enough, somebody earlier in the show, a caller said that her daughter was nonchalant about having a male in her space, in her changing room. Yes, some people will rebel against these nutty ideas, but this is in a society-wide, in a culture-wide. We're seeing it culture-wide in education and in entertainment. These ideas are being shoved down our throats. Older people like you and I, adults, we understand. But the younger people, sure, there's going to be a little bit of rebellion, but a lot of younger people, especially children, it's being normalized for them.
I think it's separating by the sexes. When I talk to young guys, they are almost universally right-wing. And I'm not even talking about race. It's not just white guys. You talk to young Hispanic guys, talk to young Asian guys about subjects like this and see what you get. With women, there's something totally different going on. I think a lot of young women in particular are buying into this. And when the teachers tell them that men can get pregnant, I think that, for example, as something we know is factually inaccurate but is socially the acceptable position to take, I think a lot of them just say, okay, yeah. And maybe some of them internalize it and believe it, but I see a very big difference. There's always been a difference between how men vote and how women vote. I think, especially when you look at younger voters, that the spread gets wider. And I think for future generations, I think that trend is going to just continue. But young men right now, with what they're doing to them and what they're expecting them to believe in and buy into, they're going to lose an entire generation of them. And it's not going to be pretty, the reaction that they're going to get. Because you can only tell someone to believe something that they know is not true for so long before they not only reject everything they say, but they resent you too for thinking they're that dumb.
I see a social contagion going on here, though. I hope you're right. And I do understand and agree with you that there's a difference between the sexes, but there are a lot of young, pubescent, puberty, earlier than that. There are children on both sexes that this is being normalized, and they will grow up, and this is going to be generation after generation. This is going to be accepted now. I hope you're right. That at
All
least
right.
males.
Well, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Let's move on to David in El Cerrito. David, hello.
Yeah, how you doing? The reason I'm calling, maybe I'm changing the subject a little bit, but I find even with my daughter, she was very good at figuring things out, determining what was right and what was wrong, and I still love her and I care about her. But I think when it comes to politics, it's like there's no way I could give my opinion, and that's kind of scary because I care about my daughter and I'll do anything for her, but I don't know what it is, where it turned around or whatever. What's your opinion?
I think what you're seeing is the same thing that I'm seeing. The difference between the sexes has never been wider than this new generation, the younger generation, particularly when it comes to issues like this. And the guys are to the right of certainly where I am, and certainly where any number of my peers are, to the point to where you have a conversation about politics with them in public. You go, hey, boys, you want to dial this back a little bit because, you can't say some of these things in polite company. But the rebellion against this PCBS has caused them to overcorrect and caused them to overreact to what has been fed to them. But I think for whatever reason, all of this PC, or I guess woke nonsense that's being shoved down their throats at the school level, the girls are just eating it up with a spoon. And they will make the argument that, men can get pregnant, and if you were just enlightened enough, you'd be able to figure that out too. And it's not something that's insincere with them. I don't think that they're doing it to pull our chain. I think that they genuinely buy into it.
What I feel, and I'll make it quick, the country has gotten soft, and unfortunately, it's going to take an issue, a major issue, and I don't ever want to see that happen, but to correct, to get people to realize a lot of the BS that's going on, and to bring the country back to a normal, whatever you call normal.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. I appreciate it. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. It's the John Phillips Show. It's the John Phillips Show. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Travis in Oakland. Travis, hello.
Hey, John, you're absolutely right. The young people are moving to the right. Half of Gen Z and all of Gen Alpha have moved to the right of the Republican Party, so much so that they're getting fed up with them. They've been fed a bunch of baloney. They're getting fed up with it, and they're reacting. In UC Berkeley, they have tampon machines in the men's bathroom. The kids there during the election last year wrote Tim in UC Berkeley on the tampon machines in the boys' bathroom. They might be going along with some of this stuff in class, and I'm talking about the females as well, just to get along and get their grades. And when these young girls who are pretending to go along with this stuff get married and start having children, they're going to go the way of their husbands, which are very much to the right. So, yes, things are changing, and it's a reaction to this insanity. Tish, for example, she's voted Democrat her whole life. Not anymore. After encountering this predator in the locker room, she will never vote for another Democrat, from what I understand. So yeah, this is they've taken it too far. And let me tell you, there's an organization called Our Duty USA who does more to fight the transgender madness than anyone else out there. They just became a 501c3. Look them up. Our Duty USA.
All right. Thank you for the call, sir. Let's go to Gabby in San Francisco. Gabby, welcome.
Hi, John. I don't normally listen to 810, but the insanity on NPR, exactly what you're talking about right now, brought me to you today. And I'm a mother of 2 teenage girls. I'm a moderate. My husband's a moderate, and they go to private school. And I can tell that, their education in comparison to what children are getting in public school is really different. And that the quality of the ability to critically think, to question all of the nonsense that they're seeing on social media seems to be much stronger in children that are having to get their education paid for outside of taxpayer money than children that are getting a free taxpayer education, which is really unfortunate. And you can see that too with public radio, where the nonsense that is just being spoon-fed to people is really impacting not just children's ability to critically think, but adults. There's just like, there's a gender divide between, young women and young men. There's a huge divide amongst adults. And, socioeconomic levels. It seems like the more wealthier you are, the more extremely liberal you are now, which wasn't the case, before in the previous generation, I think. So, I love that you're hopeful, and I hope that it's true, that Gen Alpha and Gen Z will be more conservative. But to me, it's not about more conservative. It's about more moderate and better able to critically think and see through bullshit that,
Whoa.
they're being brainwashed.
You can't
by.
say that on the radio,
Sorry.
but thank you. Thank you for the call, and thank you for the sentiment. I appreciate it. We just can't use certain words. If you want to know the list, George Carlin has a video up on YouTube, but thank you for the call. Let's go to Ray in Glendale. Ray, hello.
Hey, John. Good to hear your voice.
Thank you.
I'm a retired school teacher, and I spoke up against the transgender ideology and was removed from my classroom. And there's a certain benevolence among a lot of your listeners today in talking about transgender, calling it nonsense or calling it craziness. And I think one of the ways that we need to speak about this in order to win against it is the fact that it's an agenda, and it's a dangerous agenda, and it's a hurtful agenda, and it's a hateful agenda. It isn't nonsense. These people their goal is to disrupt norms, not just biological norms, but also social norms, all sorts of norms, because they want to create chaos. And
all right, sir, I'm up against a hard break. I have to run, but thank you for the call. Thank you for making your point, and thank you to all the callers today. We took a lot of calls on today's program. Certainly, a lot of you had a lot to say on this one. All right, that's going to do it for us today, but we'll be back tomorrow at noon for another edition of The John Phillips Show.